everybody, I'm John Good, and welcome to my good destinations. So, and a lot of people are wondering, I'm getting tired of standing up and read at the same time. So today we're going to talk about Washington D.C. It is a capital. It is a nation's capital, home of the Washington Nationals and Redskins. We used to have it back then. And we have Commanders. That is just a current team, but they need to bring back the Redskins, but it's not gonna work. But that's just a hope. So without any further ado, let's read. Chapter 1: Land and Wildlife. Washington, D.C. is nestled on the eastern bank of the Potomac River between the states of Maryland and Virginia, and covers an area of about 68 square miles, 176 square kilometers. Hundreds of years ago, the area where Washington, D.C. now sits was mostly covered with forests and marshes. Today, it is a bustling urban thank you for pronouncing it, urban area and the center of our nation's government. But this busy city still has plenty of nature of residents and visitors to enjoy. Nearly 1/5 of the land of Washington, D.C. is protected as parkland. Lay of land. Most of Washington, D.C. is a part of a geological region called the Atlantic Coastal Plain. The land there is mostly flat and low. The city's northwest corner is a part of a region called Piedmont Plateau. It is known for its rolling hills. The lowest point in the city is in the Potomac River, which is the sea level. The highest point on the Point Reno in the northwest section. It is 409 feet. 125 meters above sea level. This map shows where the higher orange and lower green areas are in Washington, D.C. Let's talk about the two rivers. The Francis Scott Key Bridge spans the Potomac River, connected Washington, D.C. to Arlington, Virginia. Washington, D.C. has two rivers that come together to form the Y shape. The Potomac River flows east-southeast along the city's western border. The Anacostia River flows southwest across the city, joins the Potomac. There are sovereign tiny islands within both rivers. Other bodies of water in the capital, including creeks and streams. The tidal basin is a special pool that was dug alongside the Potomac. It helps keep the river from overflowing into the city. Climate. Anyway, climate. Residents of Washington, D.C. needed to be ready for all kinds of weather. Rain falls about once every 3 days. Summers can be hot and sticky, with temperatures rising about 58 degrees Fahrenheit and 29 degrees Celsius. Colder temperatures make spring and fall popular times from tourists to visit the nation's capital. Washington's winters tend to be fairly mild. The city usually gets no more than 15 inches in the 38 centimeters of snow a year. But once every few years, but winter storms bring 3 feet of 1 mile, 1 m of snow or more. The maximum temperature is 106 degrees Fahrenheit and minimum temperature is 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The little girl dances with the rain in front of a White House on the 4th of July. How great is that? Because take a look at this picture. I can't show it to the picture, but it's just I can't see it because I'm reading a book. Rock Creek Park. When most people think of Washington D.C., they probably don't picture a leafy wilderness, but the capital is home of one of the biggest city parks in the United States. Rock Creek Park, in the northwestern part of the city covers more than 1,700 acres. This makes it twice the size of New York City's famous Central Park. Congress created the park in 1890 to preserve a piece of the city's natural environment. Visitors can be hike along the forest trails, go canoeing in Rock Creek, look for wildlife, and more. Cyclists enjoyed the bike path at the Rock Creek Park. The peak of plants. Washington, D.C. is known as the Japanese cherry trees, which produce the beautiful pink and white blossoms every spring. But these trees did not always grow in the city. The original cherry trees were a gift from the mayor of Tokyo, Japan in 1912. Many native plants also grow in America's capital. Oaks, indolens, and elms line many city streets. These are other tree species fill in the capital's park. Wildflowers such as violets, bluebells, and bloodrots, and add a splash of color to the parks in the spring and summer. Cherry blossoms create some of Washington's most beautiful scenery. I just remember this because earlier this year I remember Cherry Blossom Festival, and I attend this. I think Mickey and Minnie is at the Cherry Blossom Festival earlier this year, but due to the I can't. There were so many interruptions about how do we bake a chocolate chip cookie factory. That's just a real life, by the way. That makes sense. The capital creatures. Many animals made their home in Washington, D.C. Mammals such as a white-tailed deer, gray squirrels, rabbits, raccoons, and bats, are called flying foxes, live in the city's wooded parks. Experts have spotted dozens of species of birds there, from colorful cardinals to the majestic bald eagles. The city's rivers and creeks are habitats for many species of fish, including carp. Yeah, that's a director, by the way. Carp, bass, and perch. Rock Creek is a home to the Hayes Spring halibut pot, and a tiny seafood a tiny see-through creature that looks like a shrimp. This endangered species lives nowhere else in the world. Let's talk about the government. Most of the cities and towns, most cities and towns in the United States operate under three layers of government: a local and a city government, a state let me try again, a local or city government, a state government, and the U.S. federal government. But Washington D.C. is a little different. It is not a state. It so it's not. It has no governor or state law making body. As the nation's capital, it is overseen indirectly by the federal government. There is a there's a city government, but its power is limited. We have three branches. Washington, D.C. is the seat of the U.S. federal government. The President of the United States heads into the executive branch, Congress. The legislative branch of a government meets the U.S. Capitol. Congress has two parts: the Senate and a House of Representatives. Its members that write our nation's laws. The U.S. Supreme Court decides the national's most important legal cases. It leads to the judicial branch, who is charged. At one time, the federal government had complete authority over Washington D.C., but in 1973, it means 50 years ago, Congress gave home rule to the people of the city, allow them to create a local government. Today, voters in Washington D.C. elect the mayor and the city council with 13 members. The city government makes decisions about the city's schools, street repairs, and other local issues. But the federal government still plays in a big role. Every law that Washington's city government passes must be approved by the U.S. Congress. But having a say, people in Washington D.C. had a limited voice in the U.S. Congress. They do not elect of the country's 100 senators. They sent one delegate to the House of Representatives, but he or she is not allowed to vote on laws. Many D.C. residents argue that this system is unfair. Some want their city to become a state, so they can have a representation in Congress. Residents have a bigger say when it comes to the U.S. executive branch. The district has 3 electoral votes in the presidential elections. This wasn't always the case. Until 1961, D.C. didn't get any electoral votes at all. However, the 23rd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution granted D.C. a number of electoral votes equal to the least populous state in the country. Is there representing in Washington D.C.? We have a lot of populations. And then we have 14% of all Washingtonians were born in the other countries. 18% is our kids under the age of 18 and speaking in the other language in English at home is 17%. 41% is own their homes. 55% is of a popular have a degree beyond high school. 89% of a population graduated from high school. And is a number one is a 47% is African American. So anyway, it is American Beauty Rose is official flower. Although it has been proven, some people believe the rose was first grown in a White House garden. Washington D.C. flag is based on an increased or symbol once used by George Washington's family. Washington chose this site of the capital city. The woman is a long robe of represents justice, and a salute statue is for George Washington, America's first president. In the background, in his Potomac River in the U.S. Capitol. Let's talk about the history. Washington, D.C. is named for George Washington, America's first president. But surprisingly, he never lived there. In 1790, the country was ready to build a permanent capital. Washington chose to the location and hired experts to plan the city, but by the time the city was ready, Washington was no longer in office. President John Adams and about 125 other government employees moved in Washington, D.C. in 1800. It was an important chapter in the district's long and busy story. The original White House took 8 years to build and it cost $232,372. Let's talk about the early history. People have been living in an area that is now Washington, D.C. for at least 12,000 years ago. At least 12,000 years. The region's earliest residents fished in the Potomac River, hunted deer and the other animals, and gathered wild nuts and berries. Over time, the main Native American group in the region became known as the Piscataway Way. They made homes by bending young trees into arches and covering the arches with mats made of woven grass. Like their early ancestors, they fished and hunted. They also grown corn, squash, and beans. The map shows where in the Piscataway lived in what is now Washington D.C. before Europeans came. In the 1600s, the first Europeans arrived in the area. In 1608, Captain John Smith sailed up the Potomac from the English settlement, the Jamestown, Virginia. He visited the Piscataway village before returning to Jamestown. Other Europeans soon followed and settled in the area. But before long, many Piscataway fell sick and with diseases such as measles and smallpox, which is the newcomers have carried from Europe. entire villages were wiped out by the 1700s. Most of the surviving Piscataway have moved out of the area. Creating the capital. The U.S. American during the American Revolution in 1775 through 1783, the colonists fought for the independence from Great Britain. After the war, it was a time for the new nation to choose the capital. New York City and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, had been important cities during the Revolution. The U.S. leaders wanted to the capital city that was separate from any state in 1790. George Washington selected a diamond-shaped area along the Potomac River to be a site for the capital. This land belonged to the Virginia and Maryland, which donated it to the U.S. government. To design the city, Washington hired a French engineer named Pierre Elephant made the grand plans. He imagined a capital built on a hill with wild avenues stretching out from it. He planned spaces for monuments and fountains, but Elephant argued with local landowners and was soon fired. Washington hired a new surveyor named Andrew Ellicott to finish the plans by 1793. Construction was underway. Hundreds of workers, including many slaves, built a capital, the White House, and the other buildings. At Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the country's founding fathers gathered during the Revolution to create a Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Pierre Elephant's original plans for the District of Columbia shown there formed the backbone of the city's layout. A rough start. Much of the capital was still under construction when a tragedy struck. In 1812, the United States, that's a short for U.S., and Great Britain went to the war because of the conflicts where ships were having a sea in August 1814. British troops attacked Washington, D.C. They set fire to the Capitol, the White House, and the other public buildings. It took years to rebuild. Time for change. But in 1861 through 1865, Washington, D.C. felt the strain of a civil war. The city was a capital of a union, but in border of a conference state of Virginia, thousands of Union soldiers were stationed in Washington to protect the capital. After the war, many free slaves made their homes in the city. The city's population grew quickly. Here's the timeline for Washington, D.C. events. 10,000 BCE, people set there in what is now Washington, D.C. 1608 CE, it is the first Europeans arrived in the area. 1790, Washington, D.C. is chosen in the state as a site of a nation's capital. 1814, British troops burned the city's buildings. In 1848, Work began on a Washington monument, and a monument to the country's first president. It wasn't completed until 1884. In 1865, Abraham Lincoln is shot and killed in Washington D.C.'s Ford's Theater, in the first U.S. president to be assassinated. In 2001, security in the Capitol permanent increased in an ever terrorist attack in the United States. 2017, about 500,000 women participated in a women's march in one of the largest protests in the Capitol's history. In the 1900s, Washington D.C. began to look at the more like in a grand city of Pierre Elephant had once envisioned. The National Mall was created, and many monuments were built. In the 1960s, the Capitol became an important location in the civil rights movement. In 1963, that's 60 years ago, was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech on the steps of Lincoln's Memorial. Today, the Capitol still takes place where the people go to express their views and their hopes for the country's future. It's just important to tell you. I was having a dream today. But my father, Richard Good, is at the military. And they tried because I have my father because it has works on the military. No, that's okay. But my father, or my late father, Richard Good, is at the "I Have a Dream" speech during on television. What a great memory. Let's talk about the culture. Today, Washington, D.C. is not just a seat of America's government. It is also an important culture center, with more than 160 monuments and memorials, dozens of museums, and all of a calendar full of festivals and any other events. It is even home of the world's largest library, the Library of Congress, which does research for members of the U.S. Congress. The city's cultural attractions draw millions of visitors each year, and give Washingtonians plenty to do. Monuments and museums. Memorials have been built in the Capitol to remember the people and events of U.S. history. Some honor presidents and the other leaders, such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Others, such as the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, pay tribute to the people who have fought in wars. The city's museums offer something for everyone. 19 of them made of a group of museums called the Smithsonian Institution. Festival time. There are often something special to celebrate in the nation's capital. Every spring, when the cherry trees bloom, people head downtown to the 3-week-long Cherry Blossom Festival. They enjoyed concerts, fireworks, and kite-flying contests. On April 16th each year, Washingtonians celebrate Exclamation Day. This holiday recalls the day that in 1862 where slaves in the capital city were freed. Public schools closed for the day, and marching bands parade through the city. The marching band parades in front of a National Archives building during the National Cherry Blossom Festival. Sports and recreation. Washingtonians have plenty of recreation options to choose from. They can walk, run, or bike on the city's many park trials or play with their pets and a dozen dog parks. Residents can also watch professional sports, team plays, the Nationals baseball team, the Wizards and Mystics basketball teams, the Redskins football, or the Commanders team, a football team, the Capitals hockey team, and the DC's United Soccer team, or called the Washington D.C. or all call Washington D.C. at home. The Washington Mystics basketball team have been wowing fans since 1998. So what's on the menu? On the cruising in the capital and the deserves diverse. Excuse me. Thank you for pronouncing. Because the city is not fair and it's not far from the Atlantic Ocean. Crabs, fish, and the other kinds of seafood are among the favorite dishes. Southern specialties like fried chicken and grits are also popular, and over time, immigrants from around the world have brought international flavors to the DC's markets and menus. The spectacular city. The Washington D.C. had not been large in the area, but it is big on history and culture. As the city of America's federal government, it also plays. Excuse me. Thanks for pronouncing it. It also plays a very important role in the nation. The people who have lived and work in Washington D.C., knowing how special the capital city is, and every year millions of visitors discover this district's magic of themselves. Bill Nye the Science Guy. I actually remember this. The is a scientist and TV personality. He hosted of a popular show for kids called Bill Nye the Science Guy. He also written several science books. I actually remember Bill Nye the Science Guy because he's a nice guy because who's all about science and stuff like that. But he made a series and he was published on Disney Educational Productions. Yeah, it's kind of good. I was very educated because I learned about Washington D.C. because so instantly don't know about it because Daddy and my late daddy and Martha went to museum, and it would become educational. Yeah. So, if you enjoyed it, subscribe to JGN and follow us on social media, and we'll see we're going to make more original shows. And make more good destinations like that. And until next time, America, and we'll see you in the next trip.